household. I had a very orthodox upbringing. Orthodox matlab traditional, not conservative. There's a big difference. So I was always brought up by my parents to have fight for my rights, have a mind of my own, encouraged in my education and all. I then born and brought up in Karachi. So a little different from the atmosphere of KP at that time. Lived with my parents, had an arranged marriage, moved to Peshawar, and then I lived with my in-laws. So like I said, I had a very traditional life, but I always had a very forward-thinking mindset. And one of my major regrets was that I didn't get to complete my education. So I decided to self-educate. And every spare moment that I got, I used to read and read on various subjects. Like politics was always a course of discussion in our house. So politics, art, Renaissance, history, culture, anything which was my interest and anything which I felt that, I could have studied in university, I studied in my house and I gained a lot of knowledge. And book reading in books, I feel, are very, very important in developing unfair and unbiased mindset, because in movies and social media you're seeing what someone else is projecting to you. Only through reading a book can you make up your mind and make up your own judgment. It's not clouded by good looking or bad looking actors or actresses and visuals, background music. So I think my reading habit is what formed a lot of my personality. After 13 years in Peshawar, where I made a new life for myself, lots of friends, met all my new relatives and carved out a home for myself, due to the security situation in which my family our home started getting targeted, our cars started getting targeted, as that my father-in-law Bashir Bilor was the senior minister at that time. I moved to Islamabad with my children for their safety's sake. So then I became an IDP in my own country. And for the second time in my life, I had to start from scratch. And in a new place, without the safety net of elders this time. Because the elders of the family stayed behind, and me and my kids, we moved, and my husband started shuttling between the two cities. He was sometimes in Peshawar, and sometimes he was in Islamabad. So we changed our place, we changed our home, we changed the landscape around us, but we could not change our luck. And in 2018, on the 10th of July, my husband was also assassinated in a bomb blast in the run-up to the general elections. So after 21 years of marriage and giving up my parents, my home, my friends, my siblings, I felt that I'd come to an absolute dead end and life had left me with no options. But that's not who I am, that's not how I was brought up to be, and that's not what I wanted to spend my life as, like a sad, pitiable person always crying about the past. So I self-reflected and I thought, I always used to think the reason that I moved from Karachi to Peshawar, I thought the reason was that I was going to build a new home, I was going to build my family, I was going to be a great mother, and that is why I was on this path. But then I realized that my path was being written by Allah, and maybe my purpose for moving, my purpose for shifting, my purpose for all of this was something different. And maybe what I had envisioned my life as was not the purpose of my life. So I thought, contemplated, got a lot of strength from my children who were incredibly brave, and I decided that I'm going to replace my husband in the political field. So when this was a decision primarily first taken by my eldest son Daniel, who was 20 years old at the time, and because he was so full of rage and at the unfairness of what had happened. Second time in 5 years, a member of our family was born to death. And for nothing, if you knew them, they were the most lovely people. Everybody who is a political leader, apart from that, has a family, has a home, has a personal side. So my children felt devastated. And we didn't know who to blame. We didn't know who to curse. we didn't know who to file an FIR against. So Daniel said, no, we're not going to let them do this to us. And we're going to fight. And the way to fight is that my mom is going to stand on this seat. And this is going to be our way of revenge. But when we announced this decision, first to the family, and then to the rest of the people, the first thing they said was, but she's a woman. And I was like, I can look at myself in the mirror, hello, I know I'm a woman. So then the next thing was, this is Peshawar. So I was also like, I know, thank you. Then the major brainstorming started that, nobody will vote for a woman and it's a very conservative society. Now this is a fact. It is a conservative society and women's participation in general elections has been very limited. So I said, okay, but at least we can try. Once we try, when we make the effort, then we'll see whether people vote or whether people don't vote. So me and my kids and my mother-in-law, we decided that we are going to brave this opportunity and we're going to face the people and we're going to step out of our homes and out of our comfort zone and see whether the people of Peshawar were mature enough to take me as a person, to take me as for my qualities, or whether they're going to just put me in the box of, da khazar gada side of it. So I think the people of Peshawar proved everybody wrong and they came to a very mature decision. I'm not saying this because they voted for me. I'm saying this because they broke many, many stereotypes in this election.
Exactly.
They voted against the sitting government at the center. They voted against the sitting government at the provincial level. And the first time ever they voted for a woman in a general election in the history of Peshawar. So the first battle was there. And I got a lot of strength from my parents and from my children. And when my children supported me, and when my children stood up and said, so once we decided to run, I was ready to face a lot of negative propaganda. So against a woman, the easiest propaganda to use are pictures or sexist remarks or lewd comments. But my children sat me down and they said, we know what you're like. We don't care what people say. And on that day, I felt very proud and accomplished. I felt that the 21 years that I've spent in raising my kids, that day I gave myself a pat on the back and said, okay, somebody, you've not done too badly. And I had the support of my family. Honestly, I didn't care what the people said. I didn't care what the opponents said. I just put my head down and went about the task of the election campaign and running the election. So once I won, then a new set of, I would say, comedy of errors started. So in the parliament, it was tried very, very hard. I'm not sure whether on purpose or let's say maybe just by default, they tried to put me in a box. Where the other reserved MPAs, how they should sit, how they should behave. I was told what topics I should talk on. So I was like, and with all due respect to the ladies who come on the reserved seats, they're my colleagues, they're wonderful, hard-working women, but their responsibilities and my responsibilities are very different. I have a constituency, I have 21,000 people who voted for me, I have to look out for their rights. So the first example I'll give you is that when I went to the assembly, so I was told you can talk on transgender rights, you can talk on women's rights, you can talk on human rights abuse. So I was like, well, why can't I talk on the economy? And why can't I talk on the sewerage system of Peshawar? And why can't I talk on the BRT? All the male members are doing that. So I was like, excuse me, I'm also an MPA elect. I can talk on all these things too. And so, people were like confused. I won't say rude, everybody's been respectful, but confused and a little put out. So when I enter a meeting, now they're a little used to me. It was one me against 50 men. And I think I harassed the men sort of just by being there. Instead of me getting harassed or intimidated, when I would walk in, all of them would just become fidgety and, ill at ease, and they'd be like, body language would be like, look at her, now what should we do? So, then it's like I'm there to represent my constituency just as you are there to represent your constituency, Let's just get to the task at hand. There was a very big, another thing in my life is I'm from the opposition. So not only am I a woman, I'm from the non-popular party and I'm, not from the minority party. So second set of discrimination starts, but that's not just against me, that's against everybody in the assembly. And there was I'll tell you guys a very funny story. Last year there was the inauguration of a major gas pipeline in Peshawar, which runs through a lot of constituencies. Its base is in my constituency. So all the main MPs were invited, except for me. In a row, they were all invited. The gas pipeline runs lengthways, and I was not. So when I told one of the ministers, who's a relative of mine, we were talking on the phone, and I was like, it's really weird. So he's like, but you've been invited to the Women's Day program. I was like, yes, I've been invited to the Women's Day program, but the function is in my constituency. I'm the elected representative. I think I should be there to tell you people what are the, people's concerns about the gas pipeline, where they want it to be, where they don't want it to be. What will you do in the middle of so many men? I was like, I'm going there to dance. But it's taking people a while to accept that I am in a role which is predominantly dominated and played by men. And I decided to be very, very honest about myself. I'm a very anglicized, westernized person compared to many people. My core vote base is Muman. But because I'm very honest with my work, I'm very hardworking, I've given this my 120%. So I think they've overlooked differences between them and me, and they've appreciated my hard work, and for that I'm very, very grateful. I've got a lot of love, a lot of respect, and generally a lot of feel-good sensation when I'm with my constituents, when I go to their homes, when I visit them, they give me a lot of encouragement. How I was raised, how I was brought up, and what choices I made that led me to where I am today. So to start,
only among female but men politicians as well. I had a chance to study with Haroon when we were in Edwards College.
right?
Yes, he was my 2 year senior.
Okay.
Was very, very upset when things unfolded the way they did. But I see you as a very strong woman and a very strong mother for your kids to have. I think one of the pictures that came on was you in Peshawar city with a lot of national party flags around you, and maybe in 30 years time we will be seeing this picture as one of the historic picture in the history of this place.
So thank you. I've chosen these pictures. Both my children are in these pictures.
Yes.
I've taken my younger son with me into the constituency. Also, like I said, I'm a single parent. Sometimes when I don't have someone to watch the kids, then they can just come with me to my work.
So thank you very much for coming, and it's nice to meet you today and listen to you.
Thank you so much for your kind words.
Thank you, ma'am, for coming here. So one really important thing you raised was that being conservative and being traditional, there's a difference. So
Yes.
how can we differentiate it, and how important it is for the females and the men to differentiate between being conservative and being brought up traditionally?
See, like I said, I described my upbringing to you people just to give you an idea of who I am. I ticked all the boxes. I had the arranged marriage, I lived with my in-laws, I lived in a joint family system. I studied in an all-girls school. But having said that, we were three sisters, I was the eldest, and I was 17 years plus when my brother was born. My parents never said, oh no, we don't have a son or a male, in our family. A lot of relatives used to say that. They used to come to our house. My father was a well-to-do person, he was a rich man and a very good businessman of his time. So they used to come, and I still remember one of our aunts, she came threw herself in the sofa and said, what's the point of all this money? There's nobody to inherit it. So my father got really angry and he said, I have children, please. Don't brush my daughters under the carpet. So it's just that when you're given an education, along with that you should be given a voice. And along with that you should be given rights. My father-in-law, Bashir Bilor, Shaheed, he always treated me like a daughter. And even though I was very young, I was 18 years old when I went to his house, he valued my opinion. he gave me the confidence to speak up and express and interfere in family matters. So it's just that, when I mean traditional, you can do what others have been doing. By conservative, I mean that you're not throttling the females of your family, you're not making them voiceless, you're not just making them, people who cook and clean. And I'm a person, by the way, who totally can't cook. I can't even go in and fry an egg. So I'm a woman, I've been a housewife, and I've survived without cooking skills. So like I said, it's just not the done thing to put everybody in a box, Don't take the voice away from the girl child. You give everybody a voice and people will speak up, and eventually they will define their role for themselves.
So madam, I have a question, rather it's a compliment. Whatever your family has been through, it's something requires the grit and perseverance. People cannot limit it. So what are the things so much embedded in the personalities of below who are giving all the sacrifices and then living up to it?
So Dekiji, first of all, they're very, very patriotic people. They take pride in their shahadat, So, like I said, my mother-in-law was the first person who has lost her husband and 2 sons in the space of 5 years. And she came to me and she said, people pray for shahadat, and Harun has got it. So we should be proud of this rather than crying over it. So that certainly when somebody says something deep or meaningful to you, it gives you a lot of, I really took this thing to heart, and I said, yes, actually this is something I should be proud of. Secondly, they're very brave. There's just not a bone in their body which is scared or which can be cowed down. And the more they're attacked, the more they say, okay, so if they're going to come after us, they're going to come after us in any which case. We just get out there and live our life till we have it the way we want. And baki, everything is in Allah's hands, which it is, So I think that's the philosophy which we all live by. Yes.
Even though you're part of the opposition, but you're still part of the government, I want to ask if you could give some insight about the current inflation. Even the tomatoes are so much expensive. Why is that happening?
Believe me, I can't get an answer. I've been screaming from the rooftops as to why is there this much hyperinflation. So the government, because we are very outnumbered in KP Assembly, is very good at brushing our questions under the carpet. So we found a new way around it. We started taking them to court on each and everything. Where we don't get an answer, where we don't get the response that we want from them, we've taken them to court. A lot of young people complained about, lack of government jobs and this, that. So now we've taken them to court on extending the age to 63 and, the government age to 63, which has stopped so many younger people from coming into government service. And just off the record, the finance minister is my first cousin. We're very close, we're age mates, we've grown up playing with each other. And I called him yesterday, so his comment was, what are you going to sue me for next? The price hike, the tomato price. So I was like, yeah, that's next on my list now. So it's just that they can't handle the economy. And there's excuses for everything, it's the old government's fault, it's the new government's fault. And because there's a public uproar, what I feel is the biggest issue with present government today, without the fact that I'm in the opposition, they don't stick to a policy long enough to implement it. So they take a decision, there's an uproar, and they quickly turn it. And then they take a decision, and then, there's another uproar, and then they quickly backtrack from it. So even for an economic policy to have some hold, it needs to be on ground for a certain amount of time. So fingers crossed, the finance minister is very sure that in 2 years' time he's going to turn tables. So everybody buckle up for 48 months, and after that, let's see what happens. More questions?